In this video, I show you these fantasy LEDs from Moonshine Miniatures. But before we get into today's video, just want to share with you what the GGGGs are for this month. Each month, Bob the Beholder picks some of my Patreon supporters to receive gratitude gifts. And for this month of January of 2023, we have two $25 credits towards LV427. And in fact, they created a channel code, GamingGeek20, for a 20% discount off of your first order from their website. They create really unique sci-fi terrain, and if you haven't seen my video, go ahead and check it out here. They're also offering two $40 pledges towards the upcoming Sunken Citadel Kickstarter, which is launching January 30th. This is a collaboration between LV427 and Antimatter, who makes Deep Wars. I'll be creating a dedicated video for that once it launches. $50 credit towards Terrainify's store, where you can purchase STLs, prints, or printed and painted terrain. Two pledges towards the current relaunch of the Old Liberis Kickstarter campaign, which is ending on January 23rd. Also for giveaway is my original magnetic dungeon and cave set from Fat Dragon Games. And of course, we're going to have $100 towards a crowdfunding campaign, which my Patreon supporters are currently voting upon. Use the link below to go to my Patreon page to see the full list as we continue to add items throughout the month. And it only takes $1 to become a Patreon member. So this was a Kickstarter that I just backed, I think a month or 2 months ago, and Moonshine Miniatures actually didn't reach out to me to do this review video. I just pledged, I think it was a little over $10 for the full STL file set. And this is basically terrain where you are able to use what's called these balloon LED lights. And I think they're intended to actually be placed inside of balloons that you blow up to light up those balloons. Or it might be called those because they're these globes and really small. And I think it's ingenious that they incorporated these small LED lights into making terrain. I think that's ideal. In the past, I've used the T lights and hacked into those using the CR2032 battery, sort of disc battery, and had to sort of jerry-rig the wire so that it would touch. And that, I think, works perfectly fine, especially for some of my dungeon lights that I want to flicker and have that sort of yellowish glow. That works perfectly with the T lights because they're flickering themselves. But I think these balloon lights are actually a great alternative and makes it simpler to use them because you don't actually have to hack them. And the way that these work is you pull out this little plastic strip and it connects the battery to the lead and it lights them up. And then when you're done, you go ahead and reinsert that plastic part into the slot at the bottom and it turns it off. And I think most users have set that the batteries last about 24 hours, although it will begin to dim after the 12-hour mark. That is more than enough for most of my needs regarding gaming, especially since you can buy a pack of these for anywhere between $10 to $15 for 100 of them. So I have more lights right now than I need because I've bought 3 packs because I wanted different colors. And I'll tell you right now, do not purchase the bright white lights because it is too cool of a color, and most of the applications you're trying to replicate a real flame. So for example, on this torch, you want more of a yellowish cast. So purchase instead the warm white color, which is the same as the yellow version that they have of the colored lights. But if you buy the warm white pack, then that will actually make it look more realistic for most of the applications that you're going to find in a dungeon. I mean, here is a comparison. Here on the campfire, I have the white light here and then the more warm light over here. And you can see that it is much more natural for it to have that warmer tone to it. So just purchase those warm light colors right off the bat. Don't make the mistake that I did, unless you have a specific application where you want that pure white light instead. I wish that they did have a flickering version, sort of like the T lights, but I'll take these because they're so freaking cheap. I don't think it really matters that much. Also, I originally printed out most of these in this clear yellowish PLA color, thinking that that would make a difference, but actually the light is so strong on these balloon lights that it really doesn't matter what color your PLA is that you're printing out. So here you can see both of these are actually printed out in the yellow, but because the bright white light is so bright, it really doesn't matter. Or take a look at these over here. This crate I printed out in the yellow in terms of the gems, but again, the colored light underneath is so bright, it really doesn't sort of matter. The only reason that it matters is in case you want to be able to have those features look more yellowish without the light inside of them, and that gives you just the option of using it as terrain without having to put the light in. But the whole point of all of these STLs is so that you can use lights, and I think because of that, just pick whatever clear PLA that you want and print it out, and it's really going to be your balloon light that determines the color more than anything else. I did end up purchasing some clear PET G just because it was going to arrive here quicker and I needed to print this out for this video, but definitely would suggest sticking with PLA just because it's a lot easier to work with, lower temps, and easier to peel off of your build plate. Also with this portal, as well as this spirit that's coming out of this grave, I did put 0 infill and just created the outer layer just because I didn't want sort of the infill blocking the light, but I don't know how necessary that is or if I made it too thick, because here the spirit, not much of the light is actually going up through into the figure. So I might need to experiment with infill to see if I can get more of the light to show. Now, one thing I do need to mention is that all of these files that's produced by Moonshine Miniatures is optimized for resin printing. And in fact, all of these are already pre-supported. So if you have a resin printer, then that's the way to go. But I wanted to go ahead and see how well these would print out on an FDM printer. So all of these I printed out, most of them at 0.15 millimeter height, just to have that extra detail. And I did need to put a lot of supports onto my figures. Now, I'm going to put on the screen here the settings I use for Prusa Slicer, which was what I found online, because the stock settings makes it almost impossible to peel off. But even with these modified settings, it does take quite a bit of time and cleanup work to pull off this block of supports that most of these files are going to require. For example, this portal, I needed to have a ton of supports on that, not just from the build plate, but everywhere. And the chain is so delicate and small that I completely ripped off most of it when I was taking off the supports. Also here with this figure, I did have supports on this, but it cleaned up a little bit better. So just know that most of these files are not optimized for FDM printing, that I had to make a couple of modifications in order for it to work. For example, this table over here, I actually split in half and printed with the tabletop sort of this way and then glued the pieces flat back to back together so that I wouldn't have to have supports on that. So there's slight modifications that you need to make if you are going to print on FDM, but as you can see from my models, I think they look excellent. Even though I have a resin printer, I still prefer to use FDM just because I don't have to deal with all of the mess of the resin printing. Now, the reason why I was looking for lighting solutions for dungeon features is because I'm using my 3D Zombicide board for Massive Darkness. If you haven't seen my Zombicide video, go ahead and check that out here. But because I didn't want to have to repaint or make distinct what parts of the dungeon are light and what parts are dark, I just wanted a torch or some kind of light that I could place on any of the squares that are in light. And so this is a perfect solution. So I printed out a bunch of these braziers, and I did have to again modify them so that it would be printing out optimally for FDM. It used to have these legs on them, but it was terrible to have to peel it off, all the supports. I kept breaking off the legs, so I just modified it so that it's sitting on this column instead. It makes it super easy to print. And I printed out, about 24 of them with the intention of placing it onto each of the squares that are in light. Also, this portal is for the game as well, and I'm printing out a few more for that. And even this sort of forge will work as well in lieu of the anvil. So a number of these features is going to work. Also with any other dungeon that you might have, this is sort of a great solution and an easy one and cheap one in order to have lights in your dungeon. There's others that are in that file that you don't see here. There is late pledge open. I think the full pledge amount is only about $16. I might be wrong about that, but still relatively cheap to purchase all these STLs. And I think it just looks so cool having these things lit up. So I'm providing my Amazon affiliate links for the bulbs, at least that I use, but you can use any of the bulbs. Just do a search for the balloon LED lights and you're gonna see a whole host of options. And with some of these, I had to clip off, it had a little ring at the very bottom. I had to clip that off with these clippers in order for them to sit. But other than that, these things work perfectly. And I also went to Microsoft 3D Builder to modify some of the files I already own. For example, this torch here from DecoQuest, I actually hollowed out so that it could fit one of the balloon LEDs in there. So if you already have files, you are able to very easily create a cavity, a round cavity inside, and it makes it pretty easy to be able to make them light up as long as you have some clear PLA. Also, use the link to go to my mini factory where you can late pledge or grab these files. Otherwise, that's it for this video. Hit the like and subscribe, especially since I'm hoping my next video, I will have painted up most of the miniatures for Massive Darkness, and I can show you how I'm implementing these light up torches on that 3D board. So happy printing, happy gaming. We'll see you next time.